My crew really kicked it up a notch this week. Check out the account channel for details on that story.
I saw that. Congrats, Zoe. It's a big win.
Website is fully updated. We did it in record time and everyone was enthusiastic.
Yeah, I'd say that Alex was pretty crucial in making that process less painful.
No problem.
Oh, and our Houston event is now converted to virtual. Check it out on channel.
It's been great watching it all.
So if you've already seen everything, why are we in this meeting?
Just wanted to see all your faces.
Welcome everyone to one of our Slack sessions, Making Dev Teams More Successful. I'm Morgan Jones and I'm on the engineering team here at Slack. I lead several teams inside of our infrastructure pillar that help make sure Slack scales and stays reliable for all of you. We work on our job queue system, our internal performance tooling, including load testing and upgrading our runtime. I'm also super excited to have Spencer Kaiser here, principal architect from American Airlines, with us today. Later on, he'll be joined by Joe from our customer success team to share how he and his team use Slack every day to move their work forward. Hey, Spencer. Hey, Joe. Thanks for being here with us. And throughout the presentations, please feel free to submit your questions for Joe and Spencer by using the chat function at the bottom toolbar of your Zoom. We'll have plenty of time to get to those. We really wanted to replicate an in-person event as much as possible, so we'll be separating out all attendees into smaller Zoom breakout rooms, so you can have a much more intimate discussion with other people, really to discuss what's top of mind and share pain points and learnings with each other. So let's get started. First, before we jump into the Q&A, I wanted to talk through a couple of ways that Slack can deeply integrate into a development team's process and share some of what I've seen both our customers do with Slack as well as what we do ourselves. I'll hone in on two major use cases because although development teams use Slack throughout their workday to both talk about technical issues and, let's be honest, share a lot of memes, it can also be leveraged to help teams swarm on incidents in record time to improve service reliability and also to ship quality code quickly. These are two of the foundational things that all development teams really need to do well. But first, I want to tell you a short story. So I moved recently, which, as I'm sure everyone here knows, is expensive, time-consuming, and extremely stressful. And my new building has just tons of classic New York charm. It's lovely, but also, therefore, has extremely narrow staircases. So for most of the move, we had professional movers, so things went really quickly, and we only had one item break in transit between San Francisco and New York, which, having moved a lot, I call a major win. But then we realized we could buy a bigger TV for our new place, so we did, and that's where we made a critical mistake. We didn't pay for delivery. My husband and I thought we could totally get this 85-inch television up the stairs, no problem. As I'm sure you probably know where this is going, we were very wrong. While we did get it up the stairs, it took us at least twice as long as the movers and significantly more fights about pivoting, all while carrying a very expensive piece of new technology. We were just overconfident and really didn't let the professionals with the right tools handle the job, which left us exhausted, frustrated, and just squeaking by with this new expensive thing. I tell you this story because it really actually does remind me of software development. You have a bunch of skilled developers who want to move quickly and are excited by their work, and they can get the job done by doing the heavy lifting themselves, but it really slows them down. And eventually that takes a toll both on their productivity and their morale. When you provide your engineers with the right tools, you get a more engaged team working at a much faster pace, or you get a married couple spending way less time fighting and sweating on the stairs. Earlier this year, McKinsey studied hundreds of businesses to find out what conditions lead to high developer velocity. They actually identified tools as having the greatest impact on velocity because the right tools remove friction, increase innovation, and empower devs to do their best work. And improvements to developer velocity are paying off in business outcomes. In the same study, companies who are in the top quartile of developer velocity are also 55% more innovative than the bottom quartile, and they achieve 5 times the performance compared to their peers in the market. So what does this elite software development org look like? According to Dora's most recent industry report, top performing software development teams are able to deploy multiple times every day, require less than 24 hours for lead time for changes, take less than an hour to restore major incidents, and see a change failure rate of less than 15%. Those metrics were easy to achieve, everyone would be doing it, but most companies aren't there on one or more of those measurements. There's still friction for development teams trying to get things done. As you can see from some of the examples on this slide, our tools are still really failing us. So let's dive into one of the ways that Slack customers have been using our tools to help reduce this friction and increase their service reliability. Incidents are chaos, and it's really hard to get the right people, the right information as quickly as possible. At a previous company I worked for, we had very rudimentary tools for incidents. We basically had a phone tree that relied on calling the person who'd been around the longest, and therefore was most likely to know what was going on. And we just cascaded down from there. Needless to say, we didn't have a great mean time to remediation for incidents. And this was really costly because by calling folks, we had no context. They had very little idea what was going on, no history of what had been tried before they joined. And this was repeated every time we called in someone new. Even once we fixed the issue and the incident was resolved, there were no records left to help us in our incident reviews. We had to reconstruct what happened from memory or random notes people took, which meant we didn't learn nearly as much as we could have from those outages. So I've been really incredibly impressed by what our customers do with Slack to solve for all those issues that I used to have, and I want to walk you through some of them. Managing incidents with Slack is fundamentally different from what I just described because Slack becomes the single place where people, data, relevant reports, and applications are brought together. So let's start with how you can replace that old school phone tree my previous company used. I've been a major incident commander at Slack, and we do a lot of knowledge sharing with our customers, and it's been so impressive to see the really great API integrations that they've created. The PagerDuty API alone opens up a range of possibilities, like creating a channel automatically or adding and paging responders directly from Slack as well. And then once you've created that channel, you then solve the next issue that I used to come across, which is that the next person who got called had no context or idea what was going on. Instead, a channel becomes the working location and chronological record of an incident and its response, because once someone's joined that channel, they can easily read the scrollback, aka the history of the channel, to get up to speed. Another tip I've heard is to have a single person following what your responders are doing and creating situation reports on a given cadence that talk about the conditions, the actions, and the needs of the ongoing incident. Custom statuses can also come into play here. If you have an emoji that denotes that someone is either in charge of the incident or has a different particular role, having that next to their name in the channel is incredibly helpful because then everyone knows who to look to for certain decisions. Because Slack brings together all the pieces of incident response in a single place, responders can also run parallel investigations in threads without causing chaos like they would on a phone bridge or Zoom where 3 different conversations are going on at once. Different investigative angles proceed independently and simultaneously, and responders report back into the main channel with results and solutions as they're uncovered. Enabling parallel investigations means getting the right answer faster and reducing that mean time to repair. Some customers also use pin posts really effectively, where they save the conference bridge link, key status updates, and anything else that can help get someone up to speed really fast. And once you've resolved that incident, you aren't left with those fragmented pieces. Slack is the single historical record for building an incident review or postmortem. With a shared view of the group's decisions, actions, and investigations, your team can quickly hold review sessions, determine root causes, spot patterns, and work to continuously improve incident response and service quality. Another great tip we've heard is to have a custom react sheet that indicates that something should be a topic for the postmortem. That way you don't have to cut people off when they start talking about something for after it's resolved. You can just react to their post with that emoji. So it's then accessible both via search and culturally, people know what that means as well once that process has been established. In addition to enabling single incident reviews, managing incidents with Slack creates a searchable historical record of all incidents. That record's incredibly useful for pattern recognition, onboarding new team members, and finding solutions to current incidents in previous responses. What I just described when using Slack for incident response is worlds away from how I used to handle this. And in an upcoming total economic impact report from Forrester, the analyst firm has found that Slack reduces the time to detect as well as resolve incidents by a significant factor. But you don't just have to take my word for it. So Vodafone is one of the world's largest telecom providers, and to monitor and escalate customer-facing events, their team relies on the PagerDuty integration that I described for Slack. When an incident occurs in a production environment, it notifies the right team down to the right individual within milliseconds and all within Slack. This dramatically reduces the mean time to resolution by contacting and alerting the right person at exactly the right time. Before Slack, it would have taken 15 to 20 minutes to resolve the issue, and now they've reduced that down to under 5. Slack also offers Vodafone executives visibility into new workflows, which ultimately results in a better product faster. So now that we've talked about fixing broken code, let's talk about shipping code that should hopefully not break or cause any incidents. A lot of times our development process has devolved over time at a company, and that means a variety of tools get strung together to get you all the way through a full deploy cycle. This can lead to developers lacking visibility and context across this development process. You have to switch between a tool to review an RFC, another to do a code review, another to see if your tests have passed, and then yet another to deploy and monitor prod. And because hopefully this is actually a collaborative process, this means that you need to get someone to look at your RFC, then you need someone to review your PR, maybe someone to help you with QA. And if those corresponding notifications live in an email or the development tools themselves, they're often missed. I had a former coworker who prided himself on having over 10,000 unread emails, and that really slowed things down and leaves developers waiting. All of this adds up to a slower and riskier software development process. But with Slack, you can actually tie all those same tools together and remove the need to constantly switch between them to get anything done. This starts in the planning phase. By using Slack to review and comment on RFCs, the entire development org has visibility into proposed architectural decisions. You may have seen the chart that was drilled into me in grad school that the later in your process that you catch an issue, the more expensive that mistake will be to fix, which means ensuring visibility and thorough RFC reviews is really critical. One of my favorite things to watch as a manager during Slack discussions of a proposal is threads. Someone will bring up a potential issue, and as I follow that thread and see it get longer and longer, it becomes a really strong signal to me that this needs to be addressed more thoroughly, which oftentimes is actually just as simple as spinning up another channel to have that discussion in more depth. Slack can also help you streamline the code review process. Inside of dedicated reviews channels, my teams leverage emoji reactions to signal when a PR is being looked at, when that review is finished, and if there's a problem, it really reduces waiting time. By automatically pushing review notifications from GitHub into this single channel for a team, you never have to worry about mentioning the right engineers, since things can just get routed to a team's channel for PRs. And you don't have to wait for someone to see that notification or waste time by having 2 people review that PR unnecessarily. This ability is actually also really helpful for managers. If you're hearing feedback that people are getting blocked on this stage of the life cycle, you can start to watch that channel and see how quickly are people reacting and jumping onto PRs. Once your PR is merged and ready for testing, running that process in Slack increases visibility, speeds up QA, and gives the deploy commander instant feedback on potential issues and failed tests. I know a million times when I was writing code, I'd kick off tests, go start something else, forget about it, come back, refresh my Jenkins, and realize there was a failure, to only have to run things again and lose yet another hour to the deploy. But by getting notifications in Slack, you stop having that issue entirely. And then once you get to the deploy itself, Slack gives the entire dev team visibility into deploy status and allows teams to easily catch and attribute potential issues with that deploy before they turn into major fires, helping lower your overall change failure rate. Going back to incident management for a second, Slack allows for super easy communication between deploys and incidents. During an incident, asking for deploys to be held doesn't mean that you have to go to another tool or hunt down whoever's deploying right now, but you can just jump into that channel where deploys happen and tell people about the incident and ask the deploy commander to come over to the incident channel to wait for updates there. And finally, by using Slack for ops and monitoring, all your tools can pipe their alerts directly into Slack channels, and potential problems can be flagged, discussed, and triaged faster before they escalate into major incidents. This actually also really helps teams know when their alerts are getting noisy. My team can tell if they need to tune an alert based on how much traffic is flowing into our alerts channel. And if it's all of a sudden going up, they're going to go and take a look more at the root cause of what's happening. When you add up all those improvements, you start to see bigger results. As you can see from this upcoming Total Economic Impact report from Forrester, the analyst firm has found that Slack improves velocity and accuracy across the lifecycle we just talked about. Again, you don't have to just take my word for it. If you're not familiar with Cvent, 80% of Fortune 100 companies, along with more than 27,000 global organizations, rely on their software to plan, market, and execute their events. Cvent's site reliability engineers developed something called ReleaseBot, an integration that allows developers to launch new releases from within Slack itself. Cvent's CTO and co-founder, David Quattrone, sums up the integration's impact like this. ReleaseBot allows us in real time to make sure teams across time zones and offices are communicating correctly and aren't doing anything that's going to impact our customers in a negative way. So we've seen how Slack can help you improve service reliability and ship code faster. When you succeed in those areas, you'll also notice a third key outcome, a productive and engaged developer workforce. Every engineering organization we talk to says this is one of their top concerns, the relentless squeeze on top technical talent. How do you recruit the best talent for your org and then also keep them happy? A recent McKinsey study showed that developer satisfaction and retention rates are 47% higher for companies that give their devs access to relevant tools for each stage of the software lifecycle. I mean, what developer wants to schlep a giant TV up a tiny staircase when they could just wait for it to be installed on their wall and sit down and watch Netflix, the actually fun part of that activity? I know I would take the company that gets me watching The Crown faster every single time. So hopefully that gives you a glimpse of how my teams and I are using this platform every day. But I personally love hearing all about the cool things our customers are doing with Slack. So I want to welcome back Spencer and Joe to share how American Airlines use Slack to move their projects forward. Over to you guys.
Thank you so much, Morgan. Really appreciate it. Real quickly to everybody watching, please remember you can submit questions within the chat feature here in Zoom. So we can gather those as we're doing this question and answer, and then also as we do our final one with Morgan and Spencer as well. So Spencer, very excited to be talking with you. I know we get to work on a daily basis, but would love to give everybody watching a little bit more about what your role is at American.
Sure. Well, thank you for the introduction. So my name is Spencer Kaiser. I'm an architect with the emerging tech team at American. I get to work on all sorts of cool stuff, ranging from kind of new technology and new software to some really cool things like drones. Our team is within the technology transformation org at American, so we're kind of primarily looking at kind of shaking up some patterns internally and kind of making the IT component of American work more efficiently. So it's been an awesome opportunity, and Slack's been a huge part of that.
Awesome. So within your role working on that, can you give us a little bit of a breakdown of how the full engineering team works at American and how your role fits in that on a broader scale?
Sure. So we're fairly distributed, excuse me. We have quite a few developers in Dallas. We also have a ton out in Phoenix, and we also have some other satellite locations around the US and a couple externally as well. So a lot of our developers are kind of normally, I'd say prior to COVID, in the office day to day. Aside from that, well, most of us are collaborating via Slack and using things like GitHub to kind of communicate and stuff. We have all these different kind of organizations that kind of focus on one specific type of deliverable. So some are things like customer-facing technology. Others are things that might impact our crew and maintenance staff. And so what ends up happening inevitably is we have kind of these larger groups that operate like mini IT organizations within themselves, and then over time we've kind of split, broken down those barriers and learned to better collaborate across the entire enterprise instead of just within those groups.
And one of the things that we wanted to talk about are some of the specific ways that you're utilizing Slack, and of course, being your customer success person within Slack, I'm able to see a lot of these wins that you've had. One of them is the hack wars that American puts on. So could you give us a little bit of a background on that, how you run that with Slack, and then what some of those outcomes have been?
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually have this amazing opportunity every year to host the entire IT organization in a company hackathon. So we have this event called Hack Wars. We have 1,000 attendees, 100 teams. We bring in usually 50 kind of top tier sponsors, one of which is obviously Slack. And we get to hack on all sorts of cool stuff, ranging from AI and machine learning to drone technology, as I mentioned before, to just building new exciting ways of serving our customers and our employees. In past years, we've done a lot of manual stuff as far as like the sign-up sheets, and we had even a lot of the processes leading up to the event were split across multiple teams. So we had one group that was primarily responsible for just getting registration and details from all the different attendees. Then we had a different team that would handle the judging kind of components, and a different team that would handle the kind of the run book operations that actually take place during the event. And so with this last one prior to COVID, we actually rebuilt a lot of that stuff from the ground up in one kind of centralized location, and we did it all in Slack. So we built a Slack app that basically handled the entire registration flow and handled team formation and all of the kind of businesses associated with that. We actually had some really cool ways of integrating with our business teams. So we had this cool concept called the cantina, where you could have you could go and talk to folks from the business side and pitch your idea and get feedback. And that was all done through Slack too, which was awesome. So that really, I mean, that saved me quite a bit of hassle, because prior to that, I was ingesting like a spreadsheet on a daily basis and trying to, take two disparate data sets and combine them, which was kind of a nightmare. But it was a great way to kind of make that entire experience not only easier for us, but also for all of our our customers in that situation, meaning our our attendees. They had one place for everything. So they got to register in Slack. They formed their teams in Slack. They were judged via judges that were using Slack to find the right teams and tables to go to. And it was a really cool experience.
Awesome. Could you touch more on the cantina piece? One of the things that we see a lot of times with engineering teams is having an effective way to reach out cross-functionally. How are you able to gather that buy-in and make sure that you were able to utilize their perspectives as well as you're able to go through like a full thing like Hack Wars?
So it was, I can't take any credit for it at all. I helped write some of the software, but my teammates had some fantastic ideas. And the problem we were trying to address was we had all these great ideas, but sometimes they wouldn't align very well with the business. Like we'd find out like, hey, this got implemented 2 weeks ago and we're pushing this out in a couple days, or we're working with a vendor to accomplish this. We've already signed contracts, or we just straight up don't want to work on this. And so the goal was to help bring Hack Wars into a more kind of reasonable realm where the products that we created actually had a chance of going to production. And so one of my teammates had the idea of this kind of business cantina. And so we decided to build a physical bar, and not a bar, unfortunately, but what looked like a bar into our venue. And we had business folks from all the different individual organizations within their side of things. And so we had people that had their expertise on the cargo side and on the maintenance side and on the crew side and all these different components. And so in Slack, someone could go and register to basically join the queue for the cantina. They would specify what group they thought was the most relevant for their idea. They would do a little brief description, and then they would go wait essentially to find out from the bot when the cantina was ready for them. They'd walk over, they'd get feedback. The cantina members would actually take kind of notes and provide feedback in Slack, which was pretty cool. And we'd also give them some bonus points depending on the context of the app.
Amazing. I love seeing how you were able to bridge that gap. On top of that, one of the things that we've talked a lot about is the open source app that you've created called Asking for a Friend, which I think is incredibly important towards getting more information out in specific channels. Could you talk a little bit about that and how individuals are using it and what that impact has been across the board?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So we use Slack for pretty much all of our IT day-to-day operations. And so within that kind of realm, we have all these different channels that are focused on specific topics. And so we have a lot of topic, dash channels. We have one for GitHub. We have one for Slack. We have one for all of our different technologies, basically. And within those, we have a lot of people that are very eager to ask questions and they want to get feedback, and that's great. But we also have a handful of people that feel kind of concerned that asking for questions or asking for help is going to make them look kind of weak and like they're not knowledgeable. And so we wanted to kind of make that a safe place and help kind of encourage more collaboration. So we built this open source app called Asking for a Friend, which is from the whole way back when you might say, oh yeah, I'm just asking for a friend, but can I get feedback on this? And so it's a pretty straightforward app. It's using Bolt, which is the Slack SDK for JavaScript and TypeScript. And so we're using that as the foundation. And basically the gist is through a shortcut in Slack, you can pop up a modal and then type in a question for a specific channel and send it off anonymously. It then gets posted somewhere, and then it encourages people in the channel to respond with answers in a thread. And then the person can follow the thread and kind of be notified as time progresses. So it's a great way to make each channel in Slack a safe space and kind of encourage collaboration people might be afraid to.
Excellent. I've been sharing that with other people, and a lot of times the feedback is I had that question as well. And so it helps people get information much, much quicker, which has been awesome to see.
Cool.
Another piece going into having a workspace that's clean, where you can find information quickly, I wanted to highlight Slack utils and have you discuss what you've been able to do with that to maintain a very clean environment within Slack.
Yeah. So we absolutely love Slack at American. That being said, some of our users aren't as kind of up to speed on what some of the functionality is and how it might add value to the workspace. And so a couple examples are using threads consistently, organizing your messages in a single post instead of posting several times in the same channel, and even sometimes just posting in the right channel. And so we designed this app called Slack Utils, which basically is something that helps us kind of guide our users to better behavior. And so essentially, if somebody, let's say, posts or a reply to a message in the channel, we have an action. You can click on the message, and it'll suggest the user, like, "Hey, this actually might be better as a thread message," and it provides it provides kind of a little bit of guidance text, and it even includes a link to the Slack documentation for how to use threads. And so, kind of the main idea there was to provide some feedback to users for how to better leverage Slack as a whole to kind of keep the channel organized, keep notifications down, make things more searchable over time, and also it allows conversations to go in parallel, right? Because if you have multiple messages at the root level of the channel, then you can't really have two discussions at once because they start getting intertwined. So we've been using that for, I want to say, a little over a year, maybe closer to 2 years now, honestly. And it's been great. A couple of our users have been bugged by it, but I feel like on the whole, it's really changed how our users use our workspace, and we've seen a dramatic increase in the utilization of threads and just better behaviors in general. So it's been a very positive thing so far.
Excellent. The last application that I wanted to highlight specifically before going into a few other questions is the Hanger app. To hear more about how you're utilizing that. And then one of the things I wanted to highlight too is I've been able to see you implement this in a very fast and large scale. Could you talk through how you were able to do that, get that buy-in, what your process is so that people can understand that and see if maybe they can replicate that within their own organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll speak to the buy-in part first. So we actually have some fantastic leaders that really empower us to be autonomous and go solve problems that we perceive as being issues. And so that being said, we have a tremendous appreciation for universities and colleges, and we love sponsoring student hackathons. It's a huge part of our culture. We love being able to kind of share knowledge and give students a good time, and it's also a great way for us to find top talent. That being said, we would constantly go to these events, and we would be using lots of pen and paper to keep track of students. We'd be collecting physical paper resumes. It was a lot of manual processes, and at the end of the day, we'd leave and be like, "Wow, what just happened? Like, do you remember who this person was?" And this guy Joe, like, I feel like he probably is good, but no comments. And so we wanted to kind of digitize that process as much as possible, and then at the same time make our judging process way easier for us. And so we built this app called Hanger, which is an open source app. And the gist is it's everything that a sponsor might need to go and actually conduct being a sponsor at a student hackathon. They can add a Slack app to the student workspace, and the majority of student hackathons, at least that I've been to, have used Slack. So you add the app to the workspace, and then you have full access to you can ask students to subscribe to notifications. So you can, during the event, ping your audience and say, "Hey, we're stepping out for the night. In 15 minutes, come by and grab us for questions if you have anything before we go." We also had team formation and stuff in there. And so right before judging kicked off, we would have all the students go and register, which means that right before judging actually started, we would have a full list of all the different teams that were working with us. We'd know what their app was doing, where they were. And that was baked right into our application for judging, which actually let us go and hopefully select the top 2 or 3 teams that did a fantastic job. So we identified that as a problem, and our leadership was they totally understood that was something that we needed to make more efficient. They saw the value in these student hackathons because it costs us a tremendous amount to go and find talent and hire them. So this was a great opportunity for us. And so they saw the value, and they empowered us to go and build this out. Then the discussion of whether we wanted to open source it came up, and it doesn't pose significant IP for us, and it's a win for the student community. It just seemed like a no-brainer. So both Hanger and Asking for a Friend are now public on the American Airlines GitHub org. So go search them, give us feedback, open an issue, all that good stuff.
One thing I wanted to mention, when you're working with students and you're trying to get top talent to come to American, with the statistic that Morgan had mentioned about keeping talent productive and engaged, you're showing these individuals how you work through problems and the type of tools that you use, which is an incredible thing for a person that you're trying to pursue. So we have one more time, or we have time for one more question. And so one thing I wanted to ask you before we get into some of the audience ones is there any type of advice you would give someone within an engineering team that's looking to actually make an impact and get these things done? And more specific to how you've been able to pitch this to people so that you can get the resources and have the ability to actually do these things?
So I guess there's two pieces there. One is just actually getting started, and the second one is getting kind of the buy-in to actually get started. My biggest suggestion for how to make Slack apps work for you and become productive there is just to start building stuff. I've gone through so many Slack apps now that I don't know the number anymore, but with each passing one, I've looked back, and you know how you have that moment when you look back at like a middle school, LinkedIn, or not LinkedIn, I wish, a middle school Facebook post, and you're like, who was that person? Like, I'm so embarrassed. That's how I look back at my old projects, my old Slack apps. I'm like, what was I thinking building it this way? But with each passing one, I got better and better. And same with our teammates. Everyone that our teams have built has become more and more, better structure. We've had better test coverage, better organization. And so we wouldn't have gotten to where we are today with the apps we've built if we hadn't just gotten started and started iterating and building stuff. So have an idea for something, just go start working on it. Go start hacking things together and get it into your workspace, and keep building from there, and keep on learning from the different decisions you made and how those worked out. From the perspective of buy-in, it's one of those things where, honestly, we at first didn't have a ton of kind of buy-in from the business side for building some of these apps out, but we built a handful of them out, and then it just showed tremendous value. There was one specifically for some of our incident management stuff, and I know Morgan was talking a lot about that earlier. We built one out that made our process much, much smoother and kind of aggregated different platforms, because we had a whole bunch of disparate issue management platforms. And so we brought those together in a simple, easy to use way, and the value was immediate. It's helped organize that entire team so much better. They love using the tool. So it's one of those things where, honestly, if you can just kind of build something under the radar and ship it and start making progress, people see the value and they're gonna be much more likely to keep pushing that.
Excellent. Thanks for going through that. Cool. So now we've got some of the audience questions coming in that will be directed to you both. The first one I'm going to read right now is: posting every alert and comment into one big channel can quickly become overwhelming. So I need for separate channels for specific responders and control over types of alerts and follow-up messages. How do you know, though, when there are too many channels? So how are you going about your channels to make sure that they are effectively giving people information versus giving them too many or too much noise?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. I would say that channel proliferation is real. It's an issue for sure. And I would say something that my teams heavily utilize before deciding to set up a channel are threads. So if they're diving into an alert, you're doing that in thread. You're pulling people into that thread, and it acts essentially like a mini channel until we've identified that it's a big enough issue we need another channel or things of that nature. And I would say as well, if you have a ton of alerting, splitting that out into different categories makes sense. But we also have a triage channel, which allows us to take in requests and other types of alerts from other teams so that we don't have to do that all ourselves, and that aggregates it. And then we have our own alerts channel that's just for ones from our team. And we're pretty selective about what we stick in there in terms of the thresholds that we care about. There's two separate thresholds, actually. So there's a threshold for just posting into the channel, and then there's a threshold for mentioning the team, and then there's a threshold for paging the team. And so also by dividing that out, if it's just a message and someone's looking, they can see what's going on, and maybe if they notice it, they can catch it. But then once we have an mention, there's an SLA for whoever is on triage duty to go in, take a look. But then we catch a lot of things before we ever get to the point of paging, which helps us also tamp down on the number of channels overall.
Absolutely. Spencer, please go ahead and add something if you have it as well.
Yeah. So I loved all that. The one thing from my personal perspective, sections, which I know Slack added in the last couple of months, is like the biggest game changer for how I organize stuff. I have sections for pretty much everything that I work on consistently, and then within them I have the, like when to show them set to only on reds for certain ones, and that's been a total game changer to help me manage my channel. So, and also archiving ones are great. Don't forget to do that.
Great. We've got another one that came in for you, Spencer. It was, is the please use thread replies bot in the marketplace, which I believe is specific to the utils piece?
So it's not, unfortunately. We've thought about open sourcing that app for quite some time now. When I refer to the whole Facebook post from middle school kind of thing, that's one of those apps, unfortunately. So we have some work to do to kind of modernize it and get it, like, it's not using Bolt, for example. So, but that's a great question. We've gotten good feedback on that. So maybe we'll dig back in and convert that over to a Bolt app and get it on the our open source org and GitHub.
Okay.
Good question.
We've got another question here. How do you manage channel versus thread communication on your side?
Do you want to take it, Spencer?
Sure. So for me, it's primarily been for pretty much any post. Like, we always recommend starting at the channel level, obviously, unless you see a related thread immediately in the past couple posts. But once you start that channel discussion from there, we always kind of encourage people to use threads for responding. And so within that context, we keep the discussion going, sort of as Morgan just sort of had mentioned. We keep that discussion going almost like a mini channel within the thread. And if we feel like we need to communicate something back to the channel, we always leverage that, also send to channel option. But we love threads, and that's been something that's been a huge part of our workspace so far. So hopefully that answered it. I'm sure Morgan probably has other bits to add on, but
yeah,
my feedback.
I think that's the major piece. The one other thing that I find awesome that people do is, if you have a really long post or a lot of details or links you want to add that have unfurls, people break that out. If you're doing a big post, you'll say more details in thread, and then you post yourself to thread to kickstart it so that people can get the TLDR essentially. And then if it's relevant to them, they can dive into the thread. And I find that incredibly powerful, especially in kind of high traffic channels where you've got a lot of eyes. That's super useful as well.
Excellent. I absolutely love both those comments, and that little bit I add on is now that hyperlinks are a thing in Slack. Absolutely use those. And to your attachments point, if there's a lot of times where I'll remove attachments. I love the unfurled content, but if the message is big already, just remove it. It cleans up the post and makes it more concise.
100%. Awesome. We've got one last question, which is, are those SLAs for at mentions custom? Is there a way to cut noise and discourage people from using the at here in a channel with a lot of people?
I think there's a cultural component to not using at here. You could also add, a post reminder potentially afterwards to be like, you sent an at here to this many people. And Slack as a product tries to discourage that a little bit. Obviously everyone should still do what they want to do what they want to do with the product. And I would say in terms of SLAs, I was speaking more to like team expectations that we have as a team, as we've decided if we're getting at mentioned in a certain channel, we know as a team that this channel is one we need to respond to within 5 minutes. This channel is one that it can wait a few hours, and that sort of a thing. And the other way that we enforce that actually is in our triage channel, we use a white dot, a blue dot, and a red dot to indicate the severity of the ask. And there's a cross engineering team's accepted response to that. So white is today or tomorrow would be fine. Blue is, hey, in a few hours. And red is, I need you to look at this right now. And that way, whoever is on that triage rotation or in that channel knows how quickly do I need to jump to this. And it's helpful because multiple teams use that. And so whoever is posting has, puts that circle at the beginning of their post, and then we know exactly how quickly we need to jump into it.
Is there anything that you add on that, Spencer? Is there any specific etiquette that you have as it relates to blue circles and things of that nature?
So we haven't gotten quite to that level of kind of advanced communication, I guess, because that's I love that. We definitely do have the problem of people using at here and at channel too frequently within channels or for the wrong content. It happens fairly regularly. For us, so we've had kind of the cultural change where we've started to now kind of correct people and be like, hey, like, just FYI for next time, probably avoid using at here, at channel. We usually say it needs to be something that's time sensitive and applies to everyone. If something is urgent and it's in a channel that's like a topic, like we have Jenkins, for example, is one of our build solutions. If it's in the topic Jenkins channel with 700 people and your specific build was failing, probably not a good use case for at channel. Even though it's urgent, maybe hold off and let the people in the channel that are responsible for checking that out, get eyes on your message. The other recommendation, if you have one specific channel in general that's been problematic, try using a Slack workflow. Build one out where it uses the emoji reaction as the thing, and have it post to the message, with some feedback saying maybe not using that next time. So
awesome. Thank you both for going through that with us. Now we are going to go to our breakout sessions where we're going to have a more intimate group and talk through some of these. So we will be transitioning into that shortly.